After a postseason that brought about a historic amount of injuries for all-star players in the playoffs, the Suns and Bucks are literally the last two teams standing, an NBA Finals matchup that no one would have predicted at the beginning of the year, but here we are.
We are joined today by our USA Today Sports NBA reporters Mark Medina and Jeff Zillgitt to break down this matchup.
So, will this record amount of injuries be an asterisk for this NBA Finals, and are these truly the best teams this year? So we'll start with Jeff.
I don't think an asterisk applies other than that, yes, the team that wins the championship had to go through a lot just to get here. It was a grueling regular season, not only the amount of games in the short window that were being played, but also the constant COVID testing and protocols that the players and teams had to go through. And then, as you alluded to, the injuries and absences that both teams had to withstand throughout the regular season and the postseason. So the champion is really going to have earned it. And I don't look at this all that differently than other playoffs. Mark knows well, 2019, Kevin Durant, Klay Thompson were injured. Injuries had an impact on that. No one looks back at the Toronto Raptors as somehow saying that their championship was any less just because those two players weren't available. We go back to 2015 when LeBron didn't have Kevin Love and Kyrie Irving. And so there are all kinds of scenarios in which a team doesn't have all its players, and yet you get to the end and the champion will have still earned it no matter how they got there. And I think that's going to be the case between these two teams.
Yeah, I'm with Jeff 100%. The Milwaukee Bucks and the Phoenix Suns earned where they got. And look, I think that there's a way that both ideas don't have to be mutually exclusive. In my opinion, if the Brooklyn Nets were healthy, they would have beat the Bucks. If the Los Angeles Lakers and the Los Angeles Clippers were healthy, they would have beat the Phoenix Suns. But the Phoenix Suns and the Milwaukee Bucks have been seen as really good teams. They had their own set of adversities that they had to navigate. With the Bucks, you know, they beat the Atlanta Hawks the last two games without Giannis Antetokounmpo. With the Phoenix Suns in the first round matchup against the Lakers, Chris Paul was dealing with injuries to his right shoulder. Against the Clippers in the West Finals, Chris Paul was out for the first two games after getting COVID. Devin Booker's dealing with a battered nose. So it's not really so much that these Bucks and Suns teams are just the last healthy team standing. They earned their spot, and whoever gets the championship will deserve an asterisk only because of all the very challenging circumstances that came about this season.
Is this NBA Finals matchup good for the league, and what does it represent for the league when you compare it to the obsession people have had with these super teams over the past 2 years?
I think this is great for the league, and a handful of reasons why is, number one, LeBron James, Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, they're not going to be around forever. There's a next generation of stars that are coming up. The NBA needs to start showing fans that there is more to the league than just those players. And if you're looking for the years to come, players like Giannis Antetokounmpo, Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton, if we go back to the last round, Trae Young, Philadelphia with Joel Embiid, those are going to be the players that, you know, for the next decade, people are going to be watching. And I think there was also some fatigue. If general fans were bothered by the idea that they were seeing the same teams and the same players in the finals over again, then they should be embracing this, because this is new teams, new faces, and giving an injection into the league. The Bucks last won a championship 50 years ago. Phoenix Suns have never won a championship. When you look at the idea that, you know, the Los Angeles Lakers, Boston Celtics, Chicago Bulls, Houston Rockets, San Antonio Spurs have dominated winning championships over the past 40 years, and now we're going to see some new teams win, I think it's great for the league.
Okay, Jeff and Mark, Milwaukee as a franchise hasn't gotten to this point since 1974. You both have mentioned that. The Bucks have sort of been building up until this point. So how much stress this year in particular will there be for the Bucks to win?
There's no doubt they've been building for this. Mark talked about all the roster moves they have made over the past couple of years. They thought Eric Bledsoe might be the answer at point guard, and he wasn't. So then they traded for Drew Holiday. Then they acquired PJ Tucker at the trade deadline. They've drafted some players. Dante DiVincenzo, we talk about injuries, he's not available. But they get Pat Connaughton. They managed to get Brook Lopez and then re-signed him. And obviously they've signed long-term deals with not only Giannis, Chris Middleton, but Drew Holiday as well. And they've really sacrificed a lot of future draft picks. And so Mark talked about the window. I don't know if it's 3 years, 5 years, but when you look at how talented the East is with the Brooklyn Nets when they're healthy, with the way the Atlanta Hawks and the New York Knicks are on the rise, and then the Philadelphia 76ers are looking for ways to improve, you really do need to try to take advantage of this because there's no guarantee in either conference of getting back to the finals.
Obviously, a big storyline this finals is the legacy of Chris Paul and his laundry list of accolades. How would a ring cement his legacy? Mark, I'll start with you.
Well, let's be clear. Whether Chris Paul wins a championship or not, his legacy is fine. He's a sure first ballot Hall of Famer. The way people look at Steve Nash, he won 0 NBA championships, and he's still seen as one of the best point guards of all time. And Chris Paul falls in that category. He's already 7th on the all-time assist list and likely climbing higher than that. But if he does win a championship, I think it's a topping on a Sunday. And I think for his own sake, it'll be a nice reward for the tail end of his career after having a lot of playoff shortcomings, many of which had to do with injuries, some personality clashes with other star teammates and the Golden State Warriors dynasty. So I don't think that if he loses a championship during these NBA finals, that all of a sudden his legacy is in question. But I think to the earlier point that Jeff was talking about with the Bucks and the championship window, this is the window for Chris Paul. He's 36 years old. He's delayed father time and has done a lot of things to take care of his body and still play at an all-star level. But these things are very fleeting. You never know when father time ultimately delivers that decisive knockout punch. So this is the opportunity for Chris to take it, and knowing how he is, he'll do whatever he can to try to reach that goal.
Jeff, where do you think Chris Paul ranks amongst all-time point guards, and do you think a ring would also help to cement it or even elevate it?
I think the ring elevates it, but I agree with Mark. The legacy is cemented. You also throw in some Olympic championships, and the resume speaks for itself. I'd just like to reiterate just how difficult think about how great Chris Paul has been throughout his career on some of the teams he's played for. And to have never reached the finals just illustrates how difficult. I think we underestimate really how difficult it is to win. We talk about another Phoenix Suns Hall of Famer in Charles Barkley, who had some chances to win a championship. He never won one. You look at how James Harden's career has unfolded and how difficult it has been for him to win an NBA championship. And so the mere fact that we've seen some of these dynasties, come and go, it's just a incredibly difficult thing to do. And I think maybe the only people who can really talk about how difficult it is the players who have to just go through this 2-month grind of the playoffs just to win a championship.
So we've talked about Chris Paul, but what does the duo of Ayton and Booker represent? And there's been some pretty big comparisons made to these two. Are we seeing the next KOBE-SHAQ in the Valley situation?
I don't think it's going to be Kobe and Shaq, and I think probably for the Suns, and they wouldn't want it to be Kobe and Shaq because even though that duo won 3 championships, they wound up hating each other, and it resulted in a split. So far, they seem like 2 peas in the pod and really get along. I don't know to what extent they will be among like the NBA greats during their current generation, but Devin Booker's already become an all-star. I think that, in future seasons, it's not going to be because NBA Commissioner Adam Silver selected him as Zion Williamson's replacement. I think that he'll continue to get more votes as a starter. And I think DeAndre Ayton, he's really turned a corner where he was always seen as a really good talent as the number 1 pick in the 2018 draft. But while there was always that potential and that willingness to work hard, it seems like when you talk to people in the Suns organization that he's found a new gear in knowing how to work smarter and more efficiently and become a more disciplined student of the game. So I think the sky is the limit for those two, but I don't see it being a Shaq Kobe part 2.
Now we have talked about the finals team with Charles Barkley. So let's have a little fun here and compare some past teams. Let's compare this Suns team Barkley's Suns team and Steve Nash's Suns team. How do you both rank all of these?
Look, just real quick, man, the Suns team with Charles Barkley of the early 90s, those were fantastic teams to watch. But think about all the difficulties that they were running into at the time. You had the Lakers, you had the Chicago Bulls going through their dynasty. They were just up against Kevin Johnson, Thunder Dan Marley. They were a lot of fun to watch, except you just had so many great teams that they were going up against, and it really prevented them from getting that championship. But for those who who don't really recall those teams, they were a lot of fun to watch, and they were always in the thick of things, even if they didn't win that championship. And Mark probably remembers the Steve Nash and Amari Stoudemire Suns, which were really fun to watch as well. Think about Mike D'Antoni and the way he sort of reinvented the way the NBA was played with getting three-point shots up. You thought that team took a lot of three-pointers and it was a big change at the time. Doesn't even compare to the amount of three-pointers that teams take today. But that's that Suns influence on the NBA. Again, came close getting to the NBA Finals, didn't win a championship, but boy, they really changed the way basketball was going to be played for the next 10, 15 years.
Yeah, and I think when you look at this year's Phoenix team to the 93 finals team, there are some parallels in the sense that the 93 team, they got Charles Barkley. That was the difference that got them to the finals. This year's Suns teams got Chris Paul in an offseason acquisition. But I think unlike the 93 team, this year's team wants to go beyond the comparisons for two reasons. One, that 93 team lost in the finals to Chicago. But I think other than that, the aftermath of that year, the Suns window evaporated. It wound up becoming about the Houston Rockets. Then when Michael Jordan came back, the Bulls ran off a three-peat here. And I think there's this hope that even if there is uncertainty of how long Chris Paul is going to ultimately play for the rest of his career, he is 36 years old. It's his 16th season. The hope is that there's going to be this passing the baton where it's then going to be about Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton carrying this team onward. So I think that there's a little bit more of a window with this year's team of potential championship runs. When you're looking at the Steve Nash's Suns, no doubt they're very entertaining. They had a lot of good coaching, a lot of good supporting players, but they always ran to a buzzsaw against the San Antonio Spurs. Some of it's because of how good the Spurs are. Some of it's self-inflicted with injuries or controversial suspensions, but they were never able to not only win a championship, but get to that finals appearance before, the Lakers and the Spurs wound up, sharing titles there. So I think that there is a potential for this Suns team to be seen in much greater light than either of those teams.
Hey sports fans, if you want to watch more sports seriously, be sure to check out these clips right here. And make sure you're subscribed to the channel to see all the great content from us here at USA Today Sports.